and are now ready for a new epic talk. So the talk is by Gil Tayar, and actually the talk name, I don't think I'm capable to reproduce it the way it's supposed to be. So let's just say it will be about the ECMAScript modules in Node.js. So folks, please welcome Gil Tayar to the stage.
They're
exactly.
here.
Exactly.
ES modules in Node.js. Hi.
Hey Gil, welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That you didn't leave me there hanging, because I didn't really felt confident enough to do this. So thank you very much for that. So before we just hop into the talk, I have two questions. So there have been some rumors that I heard that in some different events you have been sometimes presenting your talk with a secret co-speaker. So are we gonna see your cat today?
Oh no, it's very sad. Our cat like a month ago just disappeared. So no cat. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm very sorry. I had
That's
no
okay.
idea. I had no
I
idea.
hope she has a wonderful life outside of her home.
I had no idea. I just
Yeah.
saw some videos with there was this meow going on, and I was
Yeah.
maybe we'll be also lucky today. Sorry about that. And
All good.
besides that, you have to promise that you will just answer the first thing which comes to your mind. So no cheating, no thinking deeply. So if I ask you, it's a really big question. You have to answer immediately. Static or dynamic languages?
Oh, no. That's the worst question you can ask me.
I thought so. That will be a trick question. Well, maybe let's leave it until the end, and maybe in the QA session you can give a more elaborate answer. And let's just hop straight into the talk. I cannot wait. Please take the stage.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. They're here. ES modules in Node.js. It's something I've been waiting for a long time. I will, first of all, what are we talking about? What are ES modules and why are they in Node.js? First of all, probably most of you know what ES modules are. Just to make sure, we have a file that exports a function and another file that imports a function from that file. So it's called a module in JavaScript. So the export, import from syntax and all the accompanying syntax, that is ES modules. As you remember, there's a history of ES modules. If you remember, ES modules first appeared in ES6, or what is formerly called ES 2015, and they were born there as part of the standard. But it took a long time for them to appear in JavaScript. People used other kinds of module system, if you can remember AMD and others. Actually, the front end started using ES modules before the back end, because the front end could transpile stuff and bundle stuff and everything. So right around the time when React was born, around that time, front end started using ES modules. We'll talk about front end ES modules, what are called full modules in the front. But Node.js always used CommonJS. And the first time ESM landed in Node.js, it was November 2017, so 2.5 years after they came in ES6. And there was lots of controversy and nobody used them. And they had to go through a redesign phase. And in January 2020, ES modules lands unflagged in Node.js. And I gave up this talk 1.5 years ago, exactly 2 days before lockdown in Israel. Italy was totally in lockdown, and 2 days after the conference, Node DLV, we got a lockdown. I gave this talk 1.5 years ago, and we have a new timeline. Since that last time, all supported Node versions, i.e. Node 12, 14, and 16, now support ESM. So theoretically, the move from CommonJS to ESM can start in earnest, and we'll talk about that move and how to migrate at the end of the talk. But why? Why did it take so long to get ES modules in Node.js? And this talk talks about ES modules in Node.js through that lens of why it takes so long. Another question I'm going to answer is, are they any good compared to CommonJS? What's the advantages, if any? Why not continue using CommonJS? And if they are better, how do I migrate to ESM in my code base? A little bit about me. I go all the way back to the 80s. I'm like really old. I was always a developer, never tried to do the whole startup thing, but founder and everything, but it wasn't a passion of mine. One of the things I love to do is test code and use extreme modularity using NPMs and monorepos. And because of my focus on modularity and NPM and stuff, I was very, very interested in ESM and what it could give me. I'm currently an architect at Round Forest, and we build complex shopping sites designed to simplify your shopping decisions. So, another thing that is relevant, there was a working group on modules before they landed. Now it's disbanded because we have modules in ES modules in Node.js. I was a work group member and then a work group observer. So I've tracked most of the history of ESM in Node.js up until this day. I'm still interested. So let's go. We have a lot to cover. First of all, what are ES modules? Just as a reminder, we have the same code in ESM and in CommonJS, CJS. The syntax is different. In CJS, there is no syntax, but you do a module.exports.add and insert a function in there, or in ESM, you have a specific syntax export. To use that in CJS, you use require, and you get back the object module.exports of that module, so you can get the functions from it. In ESM, it's a specific syntax import from which most of you probably know. Notice that in Node.js, the extension is not JS, it's MJS, and we'll talk about that. Don't worry, we'll talk a lot about that. But in essence, see how similar they are. Like they're mostly the same except for the syntax, and it's not by chance, because the ESM people in 2015 were inspired by CommonJS. But is this just a syntactic difference? And if it's just a syntactic difference, why did it take so long? And the answer is no. It looks similar. It looks like just a different syntax, but it's a lot of totally different stuff. And there are four main differences we're going to talk about. ESM is strict, CJS is not. ESM is browser compatible, CJS is not. ESM is statically parsed, CJS is not, and ESM is async, and CJS is not. And these differences, which we'll talk about, are the reason why it took so long to put ESM in Node.js. Let's go over them one by one. ESM is strict. So in ESM, if you try and set a variable which doesn't exist, like x, you haven't defined x, you get an error. And in CJS, no error at all, because CJS by default is not strict. If you use strict at the top of a CJS module, you'll get strictness. Another thing is, this at the top level is undefined in ESM, and CJS in non-strict mode, this is defined to be, I think, the window or the global or whatnot. I seriously don't care. So ESM is what is called a module. Okay, CJS is what's called script. In the ES6 world, you have modules which are strict by definition and script which are not strict by definition. And the most important thing and the problem, CJS is not allowed to import. It's allowed to require, but it's not allowed to import because scripts are not allowed to. So ESM you can import, and we'll see later that you can also require. But CJS is not allowed to import using the import from syntax. We'll see later how it can import stuff. But to figure out whether a code is valid or not, think of a linter which will show an error here. On the right, it's an error. There are no errors, and on the left, it's definitely errors. So how do editors, linters, and runtime know whether some code is a module or a script, whether it's ESM or CJS? They need to know how to parse the text, and in case of runtimes, run it. And the Node.js work group decided upon a simple rule. Node.js will know that a file is ESM if and only if the extension is MJS, and a file is CJS if and only if the extension is JS. That way, when it loads a file, if it's ending with MJS, it's an ESM and can be run as an ESM. And if it's JS, then it's a CJS file and can run CJS. And a lot of people call the MJS the Michael Jackson script. So it was a very, very simple rule. It's, you immediately understand it, you know it, very, very simple. But the community hated MJS. I mean, .js has been with us like since 1995, since Brendan Eich, and now suddenly you want to change the extension. Not only that, some toolings had problems with MJS. Today they don't, but back in the days they had a lot of problems because they didn't know what the hell this MJS thing is. So they changed it. So Node.js also allows adding in the package JSON a type colon module. If you add that in your package JSON, then, and this is every JS file is now an ESM. It's not either or, it's if you add type module, every module file is now, every JS file is now an ESM file. And if you really, really want a CJS file, you can add a .cjs extension. It's also allowed. And the simple thing was now made complex because if you look at a file, you don't know whether it's ESM or CJS, okay? You have to look at the package JSON and remember stuff. Oh, horrible. A simple thing was made complex for sentimental reasons and tooling reasons, but that's okay. I mean, we're human. I totally understand that. 2, ESM is browser compatible. And for me, this is the biggest. This is the biggest important thing about ESM. Well, let's talk about that. Let's take an ESM, a Node.js ESM module. It's a very simple module. You import greet from a module.mjs, and you console log the function that is called, and it writes down hello world. And the other module exports a function greet, which returns hello world. Very, very, very simple module. If you run it in Node, it'll work, and it'll write hello world. Perfectly simple. The beauty of it is that the same code, exactly the same code, will work in the browser. Obviously, if we're using Node.js stuff, then it won't work in the browser, but a lot of code will work in the browser. A lot of libraries, think of Lodash as an example, will work the same, using the same ESM syntax in the browser. No need to transpile even. Notice that you won't even need to transpile. If you add a type equals module and the browser looks at the import from here, if the browser looks at the import from on the left, it will go and HTTP fetch a module.mjs and do the right thing. This is total browser compatibility. But this is only because Node ESM mandates a file extension. If you notice the import, it's not saying /a module. It's saying /a module.mjs. If it was CJS, it would be /a module and CJS would add the .js thing implicitly. Node doesn't allow that for ESM. You have to define the full path to the module in question. And it did that for browser compatibility so that the same code will work in the browser and in Node.js. By the way, Node.js is adding lots and lots of stuff to make it even more browser compatible. Things like events and fetch maybe and streams, a lot of things that are browser specific but can be ported to Node.js are being ported to Node.js, and that's a great thing. Not only that, if you in CJS, if you do /a folder, it will search for /a folder /index.js. That does not occur in ESM. You have to specify the path to the whole file. This is very important. Again, for browser compatibility. What about bare imports? If I import something from Lodash or an ESM module without // or whatever, does that work? Obviously, it works. Otherwise, the whole Node ecosystem would break down. So it looks at Node modules, and the whole logic from ESM is also in CJS for bare imports. If there's a dot at the beginning, then you have to specify the whole path. If there's no dot, then it works like CJS. And why is that? Well, that doesn't make it browser compatible. And the answer is browsers don't allow bare specifiers. Browsers have to have either a full URL, HTTP : / whatever, or / whatever. Bare specifiers are not allowed in browsers, so Node can do whatever they want. But the nice thing about it is that bare specifiers don't work in browsers today, but they will in the future, at least I hope so. And there's a feature called import maps, which is actually implemented in Chrome today, and hopefully we'll get to the other browsers soon, which allows you to define an import map, okay, which tells the browser what to do with bare specifiers. So if you import from MJS example and there's an import map in the same file, it looks at the import map to know which file to load from the HTTP. So hopefully we'll get total full compatibility, including bare specifiers and Node modules, etc., between Node.js and the browsers, because inside a package, all imports are compatible even today. And between packages, the idea is that when you npm install a package, the build tool will generate an import map, which you can use as is in the browser, included by the HTML, and boom, you get instant compatibility with no Webpack or Rollup or any other boundary. So full browser Node.js compatibility, which is a dream of mine, like for years, yay, but still in the future. But at least Node, this is important. Node.js ESM allows a migration, allows import maps, and the ability in the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully, to have full compatibility. 3, ESM is statically parsed. Let's look at how CJS modules are loaded. Let's take this example. It's a require that requires another module, and the module accesses 2 other modules. Okay, so let's see how this works. First of all, the top module is loaded, and it starts to run. Immediately, it is executed. When it's executed, it finds the require. The require immediately and synchronously loads the next file and runs it, finding the next require. The next require defines the module exports and runs the console log, and we're great. Then the next line here, the other require runs, module is loaded. Notice that we have a problem here because the bottom module has greetings in it, and the top module has greet. So boom, what we'll get here will be undefined, and we will crash during runtime. Greet is not a function or whatever. This is in CJS. ESM works a bit differently. Again, same thing. I just changed the syntax from CJS to ESM. Let's see how it works. First of all, the file is loaded. It is not executed, but the runtime looks at the import and understands that it needs to load hello.mjs. It loads the hello.mjs without running it, looks at the imports, and notices that this is export here and this is import here, so it binds the two together. It's not yet running anything. Now it looks at the imports, loads who.mjs, again, not running anything, and binding it here, and loading this, and boom, it understands that there's a problem with the binding. It hasn't run anything, and you get a syntax error before everything is run. So the parsing and binding fails before the execution. How do we fix it? We change this to greetings, and the thing is executed now. Once everything is loaded, all the files are loaded. Now we can execute them in order. So first of all, the top bottom module, and then this module, and then this module. And lastly, this module is executed, and we're done with the program. This is totally different from CJS. It looks similar, again, looks same, but it's different loading. And yes, static parsing. And notice notice an interesting thing. The browser can theoretically load lots of files in parallel, the browser or Node.js. And I actually checked, and it does load things in parallel. So loading and parsing theoretically can work in parallel. Not execution, but loading and parsing can work in parallel and thus be faster than CJS. So yes, static parsing, yay! This enables loading of all the modules much faster, and you get the errors much faster even before the runtime. And actually, it's not that big of a deal. I'm doing it a big of a deal, but it's not that big of a deal. But it allows something else. It allows ESM to be async. We talked about that. The two files can be loaded and parsed concurrently. ESM, loading and parsing, is async and concurrent. Execution is synchronous. In CJS, loading is synchronous and serial. In ESM, because the loading and the parsing is async, you can't dynamically import a module without waiting on it, without having it return a promise. You have to await that module in order to import it. You have to await that import in order to module, because the loading and the parsing is async. In CJS, require is totally synchronous, so you don't have to await it. ESM, whilst you await the import, requests can happen. Think of that. Think of an HTTP server. It can continue loading, executing requests because everything is async. In CJS, it requires stop service. ESM, and we'll talk about it in a second, supports top-level await, and CJS, because it's synchronous, doesn't support top-level await. What is top-level await? Top-level await is the ability to await at the top level without having to add it into an async function. As you know, if you want to await, you have to have the function that the await is in be async, except if it's top level and you're working in Node.js. If you're working in Node.js, you can just await at the top level and it just works. This is great. So you can do asynchronous read file, asynchronous HTTP fetch, and it just works because ESM is async, so the execution can be async too. I've been using top-level await for half a year now, and I have to admit, it's much nicer than I thought, mostly when writing scripts and others, but not only. This is great stuff. To summarize, CJS versus ESM. ESM is strict, CJS is not. ESM is browser compatible, and this is crazy important. CJS is not. ESM is statically parsed. CJS is not. ESM is async and supports top-level await, and CJS is not. For me, the two biggest things is ESM is browser compatible, and ESM is async and supports top-level await. These are the two yays of ES modules. What about, we've been using ESM for years now, using Babel or using TypeScript transpilation. And what that does is it takes imports and converts them to require. That's basically what Babel does when running under Node.js. When using a bundler for front end, it takes those imports and knows how to build a bundle that includes all the imported files. But let's talk Node.js. All it does is transforms imports to require. These kinds of modules, and they're not ES modules, are not native. They're transpiled, and where they are called full modules. And we'll see it in a second, I think, later. Full in French is false. And the reason that they're false is they're transforming ESM from an import to a require. So all the things that we've talked about, top-level await and others, are not supported. So no two-stage async parsing and execution. This is not spec compliant. It uses the Node.js CJS module resolution, so it's not spec compliant. If you take an ESM module, a full module, and use it in as is in Node.js, you may get errors because imports in both places behave a little bit differently. So that's why it's full modules. And the funny thing is that because it's full and it supports extensionless modules path, so you don't need to write .js or .mjs, it's not browser compatible, which is ironic given that it's not browser compatible without transpilation, which is ironic given that most of the full modules are written for front. So let's talk about full modules and Babel transpilation. ESM is strict. Yeah, well, okay, so is Babel. Babel transpiled are also strict. ESM is browser compatible. Babel transpilation is not browser compatible. ESM is statically parsed. Babel transpilation is not because it transforms into a require. And ESM is async and supports top-level await. And if you're using Babel transpilation, you can't use top-level await. ESM is native in ESM. Babel is transpiled. Not a big fan of transpilation. But there's more. Let's talk about exports. Remember main and package JSON? So if you have a main in your package JSON, like this, main.mjs, then you import something from a package, it will actually load the file ./main.mjs because that's what's written in main. Okay, so main is what is the entry point to that package. But today, nobody is stopping users from backdooring. Import prefix from a package slash internal file.mjs. If you anybody can just slash and go deep link into a file in the MJS, and this is like, oh, not nice until now. ESM enabled exports. Exports is a new thing in package.json where you can specify what the entry point is using dot, and you can specify other entry points. For example, dot/world will translate to dot/world.mjs. Now we have two entry points of the package, so I can import from a package, and I can import from a package/world, and it will go to main.mjs and world.mjs according to the exports in the package.json. This is great. But we will not, once we have exports, we can't deep link into the package, which is great if you want to know that your package has only the entry points that you allow. So you will get a runtime loading, error loading. By the way, I'm attributing this to ESM, and it definitely happens in ESM, but this also works in CJS, believe it or not. Exports is supported also by CJS. So yay, exports, and I've been using it, and it's really nice. Okay, what about more stuff? Let's talk about conditional exports. What if I want a package that I can both require and import? This is interesting, and this is important for migration. Today, it's impossible because if the entry point can be either an ESM file or a CJS file. It can't be both. So you have to choose, unless you can specify conditional exports. So in your entry point, you say import. If you import the package, use this file, and if you require it, using this file. This is great and helps build dual mode libraries. And I've seen many libraries that are dual mode. What's the latest that I've seen? Zod. Zod is a dual mode. I think Yards is also dual mode. More and more libraries are becoming dual mode libraries to support both CJS and ESM. So I'll skip that because we don't have that. Okay, so dual mode libraries, this is great for migrating the ecosystem, the NPM ecosystem from CJS to ESM. And there's even more, but really I have only 30 minutes, so I'll stop here, but we still have more to talk about. Let's talk about migrating, because we want to migrate. Back in like a year and a half ago, when I talk, well, I will talk about that later. Let's talk about how we need to migrate. So let's take a toy application. So we have a CJS application, which requires another module, which exports a function and then console log, as we've already seen. So two modules, which are CJS. There are two ways to do it. One way is migrate bottom up. So first we take the bottom library, bottom module, and change it to MJS or JS let's change it to MJS, and we change it to an export function. Now we can't use require to get at the module. We can't, like, on the spot. We could, and we can't await import. We can't await import because await isn't supported in CJS. So we need to do this weird thing where our top level function is async, and then we can await whatever. There's another option which is much better. Instead of importing, I've somehow one slide was there. What we can do, as I said, we're not allowed to do require, but there is a way to use require. No, sorry. I messed up. This is all we can do. So as you can see, migrating bottom up is really weird. Really weird. It's not a good idea. The better way is top down. Top down means taking the top module, migrating it to import, to ESM. Once you've migrated the top module to ESM, you can get the require to require that module. There's a way to get it require inside ESM and then just require the modules that are still ESM. Another way to do that is, instead of requiring, just importing the module from import supports CJS files. So if you import from a CJS files, it will work. There is a problem that in some cases it doesn't support named exports, so you'll need to do this kind of import. It will tell you, I don't support named exports, and you'll have to import it this way without the curly braces, and it will work. Once we've migrated the top, we can start migrating the bottom libraries top down. So those are the two options on migrating an application. So are we there yet? Can we start migrating? And this is what I wrote in a year and a half ago. There are problems, blah, 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 yes, yes, yes. This is so 2020. Today, the answer is yes. Start migrating. You can start migrating now. A lot of open source packages are starting to migrate. All single source open source packages in 2021 will be ESM only. And there's this trend in open source NPM packages of going ESM only because they don't want to do the dual mode thing. So slowly in the coming years, you will be able to use less and less packages if you're continuing with CJS. At Roundforce, we've been pure ESM for half a year now. Very minor problems, easily worked around. VS Code and WebStorm work without a problem. Actually, refactoring and IntelliSense are nicer because you're using import-export, and even bundlers are starting to support Node.js style modules. There are problems if you're using Jest, either stop using Jest or wait for ESM support. Jest is the only test runner that doesn't support ESM. And proxy acquire and other library markers don't support it, but test.js does support it, and hopefully the others will come soon. Summary, ESM is much better than CJS for all the four reasons I've said. Strict, browser compatible, statically parsed, and supports top-level await and is async. But it breaks compatibility with Babel TS ESM. So because it's browser compatible and it's async and supports top-level await. And this is the main reason for the time it took. A lot of people wanted to support Babel ESM kind of modules, and the Node.js Working Group said, no, we need to be standards compliant and not NPM compliant. And I think it was a brave thing they did, and I think it's the right thing they did. Migration will take a bit more time, but it will be good migration, standards compliant migration. And it's worth it because standards compliant is a must-have, async module system is important, and browser compatibility will be a game changer in the coming years. So start migrating now, or else you may be caught unable to use new versions of packages. It will take at least 1 or 2 years until ESM is the default, but start now, start thinking about it at least now. And yes, ESM modules are coming. And last but not least, I prepared a little going away video. So here we are. Oh, no. Again. There we go.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
Thank you very much. Almost on time. Thank you very much. Hopefully start migrating to ESM.
Wow, just wow. So that was very, very unexpected and very well illustrates like all your points in the end. I mean, like many things actually come to my mind like after watching your talk. Like, so first of all, like basically the ECMAScript modules, like first time people encountered them was around year 2015, right? When the ECMAScript 6 came out, so then it was renamed to ECMAScript 2015. So we have this naming scheme so that it's clear, like with the chronology and all this stuff. But the thing is, right, that like we have been using this for quite some time now, but without the standardization. So there were like many different workarounds, like in the browser, webpacks, whatever. We want to use all these great modules from the NPM, but we are in the browser, or we want to use them in the node, or whatever it is, or we just want to use that import export syntax, even though it's not supported, because we like the static code analysis. So I think it's was really extremely valuable to like take like a deeper dive into that, like how it's actually is now for real when it was standardized, because again, like many of those pieces of information could be missing because many people don't stop think about it like 4 or 5 years ago, because like, okay, I import, I export, I know what that means, and it somehow works, like even though it's not real, somehow behind the scenes it works, so I don't really have to think about it. But there are those implications, right, which you already like listed. So I think like thank you very much for that. I think it's a very, very valuable topic, and yeah, we should all start migrating, right?
Totally, totally. As I said, I've been using it for half a year, and it's like it just works. There are even benefits here and there, weird stuff. And if you're using Jest, don't even think about it. But don't use Jest. Oh no.
Come on, Jest is pretty cool. By the way, before I forget, sorry to interrupt, folks. Please, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to post them in a chat or in the Q&A section next to the stage presentation, right? So we can ask Gil those questions, because I think there is stuff to be asked. So, for example, what I was taking note during the talk was that, like, yes, we can now await imports in the node. Does it have any sense to do that in the node? Because in the browser, of course, this is usually like that we want to do something lazily because we care about the startup time. But in the node, like when we are starting usually some kind of script or server or whatever that is, or if it's like one of like cloud function, or if it's like a long running process like server or whatever, does that, what is the use case when we would want to do that in the context of the node, that we like really like await an import of some module in the node environment?
Yeah, await import is, I'm trying to think of a place where I used in Node.js await import, and I can't I've used await, read file and await HTTP fetch as top level awaits, but await import, I mostly haven't done that.
So it's mostly just for the compatibility reasons with the browser. So it's good to know that this is possible.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, one way, we're not using it this way, but let's say you want to import different modules based on whether you're in production or you're in dev. So you have node env, so you can await import this or that based on an environment variable. So that's
That
one
makes
way to
perfect
do
sense.
that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Another is if you're in a library and you have what is called not paired optional dependencies, where maybe somebody didn't give you some module like some module, and it's not in Node modules anywhere. Yeah, so you await import, get an undefined because it's not there, and or throw an exception is thrown. You catch that exception and say, okay, I don't have this module. Let's do something. So it is useful, but I agree with you, not as useful as in the browser.
For example, like those optional peers, is this something which can only be done with the await, or we can just wrap also like the static import with the try catch, or this is only supported with the await?
No, you can't statically you can't wrap it, because import from and are top level stuff. You can't put it inside a function or inside try catch or whatever, because they're statically parsed. Let's not forget. So you have, if you're doing it, then you have to await. The nice thing about it is you get top level await, so you can still await import on the top level and not have to put it inside an async.
Definitely. Another thing which I was not aware of before is that like you can specify those exports in the package JSON, that you can kind of prevent those deep imports from your library or whatever it is, right? So, and I think this is also extremely valuable because I've seen like in the large enterprise environments, people just start consuming stuff because they just needed it and it was just there. Somehow they could get a hold of it and it was your internals, right? And then you want to like refactor or something and suddenly you are breaking 5 consumers without like ever intending to do something like that. So there's definitely something to explore. And as far as I understand, this is the new stuff which was coming with the standardization, right?
Yes. Totally great, feature. The exports thing, I totally agree with you.
And what about the TypeScript? So because like maybe you are aware, like there is like this very popular, like it's called Nest.js, which is kind of like Angular for the Node. So you have like nice, like first of all, you have a like first class TypeScript support. You get all these decorators, so you kind of like can follow the same mental pattern. So if you're a front-end developer which specializes on the Angular, then of course it's much easier for you to get started because it all feels familiar. Is there already like some kind of like a nicely working integration which would then transpile TypeScript into like real native ECMAScripts?
Totally. At Round Forest, we're using regular JavaScript. We're using JavaScript with JSdoc that also gives types, and we're using TypeScript. And TypeScript, if in the tsconfig JSON you say that you want to transpile it into modules, then it will leave the imports alone. It will leave the imports alone. No, and it just works. Yes, we've been using it, and it works.
So then this native resolution takes over and it continues as intended. It's just the types were stripped. And yeah, so that's perfect. So we are actually already benefiting from this. So it was in the Node 12 once this was like enabled by default. Was it the 12.0.0 or like, because before it was like some feature flag, right? Like some experimental for a couple of versions.
Yes. And then they unflagged it in 12 dot something. I don't remember. But if you're using the latest 12 or even not the latest, but like a half year, then you're getting it unflagged and it just works in 12 and 14 and 16.
So speaking of that, could that have led to any kind of like performance improvements just by like updating the Node version for the people without them doing anything, just because like now it works like this, or the performance didn't really change?
Of Node, definitely every version is much faster than, well, not much, but it's faster than the previous one. Have I seen performance improvements from the move from CJS to ESM? I'm pretty sure there's some level of performance improvement when loading the application. So maybe if you're using serverless, you could maybe get some performance improvements in the cold start time. But I have to admit, I've never tested it.
Yeah.
But because ESM is async, then you should be getting some performance improvement.
Maybe this is also something which can then be like another use case, like if you have like some cloud serverless, whatever stuff, and then if you just do those like await imports and like only some of them based on context, then maybe this can also then make stuff faster and cheaper for you and something like that, right? So I just like trying to think of like why people, like another reasons to care, right? Like just like on top of my head, what could be?
Totally. And remember that if you're await importing, then the server is continuing to work because it's all async. Whereas if you're requiring something, then everything stops to standalone until that requires them. So that's another benefit.
Yeah. Exactly. So that would translate into like a faster response if you have a part of your like logic which handles the most common use case, which you load like immediately, and then additional modules maybe will be postponed, which handle some like more rare logic or something like that. So looks like, folks, that there is definitely like a lot of room for improvements if you migrate to this and start leveraging all these approaches. So do we get some questions? Let me quickly look into the chat. So Luca just says like really interesting talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Luca. We are happy that you enjoyed. And so what do I see right here? See something like, do I really have to use MJS as an extension if I'm using ASM? But I think you already answered that in your talk, that there is this field, right, in the package JSON.
Yes, if you add type module in the in the package JSON. You can use JS. And as I said, at Rainforest, we've been using half a year with a JS extension. And it's recommended because some tools still have a problem with MJS. So I would switch to JS with type module.
Another thing which comes to mind, like for sure you are aware of this website called like node.green, which kind of lists the support of the latest ECMAScript features, right? And you see like for which version supports like which level of the language or which construct which is coming in the new language. But is there something like this about the packages, like some kind of like an overview, like what of the popular packages are dual or already migrated only or still old or something like that? Does this exist?
Ah, that's an interesting one. No, it doesn't. Not that I know of.
Because that would be
but
probably
it's,
also something useful. I can imagine, at least for this transitory period, when, like as you said
yep.
in the movie, that like later we can forget about this, but until we are in this transitory period.
But an important thing is if you've migrated to ESM, your application is migrated, you can still import CJS modules.
True.
Okay, no problem. You can just use import and you might import CJS modules. So, but if you're using CJS and you want to import ESM modules, you have to do a wait, which is very, very difficult in your code base. So if you're in ESM, you don't really care whether a module is CJS or ESM. It's only when you're in CJS world that you care.
So it would be, the website would work the other way around. It would be kind of like a reminder of those people who didn't migrate yet, like, look, this is gone, this is gone, this is gone, right?
Exactly. And Sindre Solhus, which is one of the biggest
Yeah,
open source contributors to the
yeah,
NPM mod, he has, I don't know, hundreds of modules
yeah,
and
yeah,
very,
yeah,
very modules.
yeah.
He decided in 2021, everything will be migrated to ESM, no CJS. So if you want continuing support for his modules, go to ESM.
So that means like,
Start now.
sorry, that like transitively, at least transitively, like most people are affected because his
Yes,
stuff is used like almost in everything.
I've already seen issues where, oh, I can't use the latest version of this and that library because it's ESM. I've already seen this stuff. It's slowly happening.
Well, I think it's for the good thing, and it's also, I think it's like really great if these people in the community who realize that they kind of will this kind of impact, and then they take the time to do all this work to push like the whole ecosystem forward, because they kind of understand that they can like make a nudge in the right direction exactly with this kind of step. I think that's pretty amazing, because in the end, everybody will benefit. Everybody will benefit once it's done and forgotten, right? Because it's just better. It's just better.
Yes, it's like the move from callbacks to promising.
Yeah, definitely. So that being said, so we don't really get more questions, so we can come to the big question, right? So, oh, sorry. Oh my, I may have made a mistake. So anyway, no more big question. We will leave it unanswered. Static or dynamic, time will tell in the future. So with that being said, I would like to thank you, Gil, again for a very interesting talk. I learned a lot. I think like most of the folks learned a lot about how to do it the right way and what the future holds. So I wish you a great day and see you in the next edition of the jsday Italy. Ciao.
Bye, everybody. Ciao.